10 years ago, or 10 days ago, excuse me, I'm growing too old. 10 days ago, I wish it were 10 years maybe, I celebrated my 58th anniversary to the priesthood of the Episcopal Church. I was 29 years old at the time, very naive, wondering what the world was going to be like when I got older. Here I am. I was ordained here at Grace Memorial, along with Larry Davidson, maybe a name some of you know. He was from St. Stephen's Cathedral. St. Stephen's downtown was the cathedral at that time. And we were ordained by Bishop James Carman, who was then the Bishop of Oregon. Wonderful memory. I was ordained at a time of controversy. The ordination service came from the 1928 prayer book that was going to be updated throughout the Anglican Communion worldwide. And I was ordained with the 1928 prayer book service. As we all know, the English is quite different. And no women were allowed on the vestry at that time. A decision was made in Seattle at the General Convention in 1967 to allow women to be on vestries. And lo and behold, Janet Growey is a name that you might remember in this church. She was the first vestry person, I believe. I know she was the treasurer and signed my first paycheck. At that time, I worked with the Sunday school and the youth group and helped Dwayne Alvord, who was then the rector of Grace Memorial, with pastoral care. I was also hired by the Diocese of Oregon to be city missioner in order to work with ecumenical issues and issues arising from social concerns. I worked 4 days for the parish and 2 days for the diocese every week. By the end of 3 years, I had 2 full-time jobs. 3 months after being ordained, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. We all know the story. The civil rights movement was transformed by his life and by his death. Tomorrow is a day set aside as a national holiday to honor the memory of Martin Luther King Jr. And what a wonderful place to go in Washington, D.C. and see him rising above the park there in Washington, D.C. I remember the outpouring of violence that broke out throughout many cities and the attempts by others like myself to honor his nonviolent message to change our society. He was a follower of Jesus, and he was nonviolent. He wanted to bring about justice around issues that had been part of this country for centuries. And he spoke to us about that for many years. What a powerful voice he brought and still brings to us when we listen to what he has to say. So 3 months after my ordination, at that time, that was 3 months after Martin Luther King was assassinated, there was another assassination of Robert F. Kennedy. So within 6 months of being ordained here, I can remember being caught up with these 2 events, how serious they were for the life of our country, for this community. 3 months after the assassination of Martin Luther King, I was at Westminster Presbyterian Church, 2 blocks away. Over 100 ecumenical clergy were there, gathered together during the Rose Festival. And we were going to hear Robert Kennedy the brother of John Kennedy, John F. Kennedy. I had seen his brother, John Kennedy, in San Antonio, Texas, when I was in the Army at Fort Sam Houston, Texas. He spoke there. The next day he went to Dallas and was assassinated. So here his brother Robert Kennedy was running for president in 1969, gave this powerful speech at Westminster. He left Portland the next day, assassinated in Los Angeles. Violence erupted again. And I can remember Dwayne and we were trying to find ways to work on solutions. What is it that we can do in order to understand these very serious problems, where they might lead? At that point in time, the ecumenical movement was emerging. It never really existed. We were also separate. Dialogue with Roman Catholics was taking place out of Vatican II. Pope John the 23rd was taking a strong voice in how the Catholic Church should be renewed, restructured, and he wanted to find a way to work with Protestants. And it lasted 3 years, the Vatican Council, on and off. And we would get reports on it when I was in seminary. One of our professors was a part of that Massey Shepherd, and he would come back and tell us all about it. Grace Memorial banded together with Westminster, Fremont Methodist, Augustana Lutheran, and Central Lutheran, all of which are in our neighborhood, for a series called Living Room Dialogues. Members of each church, we would divide up in groups of 10 to 12, 15 from the different churches, and we would meet in living rooms regularly throughout this area and talk about our common ground. We tried to stay on how we were alike, with how our histories and our developments separately, and it worked, rather than highlight our differences. One thing that came out of that I want you to know, because I am very grateful for it, this was going on throughout the church, all over in this country. It led to a common lectionary. You can almost bet on, if you were to go to church at one of these churches now, you would hear the same lessons. Not always, but we tried to do something that was part of our togetherness, and including Roman Catholic. So we found this to be very helpful in our dialogue, and we changed some things at that time. We tried to bring racial justice into our living room dialogues, but none of the congregations had much to say about that because they weren't diverse, and we came to realize that. That was part of our problem. And I was pleased when Ted Baugh from St. Philip's Episcopal Church came to this church and joined it with his wife and 2 children. And he laughingly claimed himself to be a missionary to Grace Memorial, opened his home for the living room dialogues, and shared his own experience as a black person in the South, being raised, and then moving here during World War II. I can remember the ways in which my work at Grace and the city missioner work for the diocese came together with civil rights, ecumenical, racial tensions, inclusion of Native Americans, Vietnam, many other concerns. They were all here during that period of time. The Portland Council of Churches at that time was extremely important in setting up what they called community action programs. 5 such programs were developed in different parts of the city, downtown, out there. One was called Snow Cap out towards Mount Hood. 5 programs in the area throughout the city. And all of them had different types of ministry, feeding programs, and churches belonged to these CAP programs. We belonged here at Grace to one of them. And they were to assist the churches and the city to create and renew ministries for people like you and me. And we did develop those ministries. Feed the Hungry, Meals on Wheels. These all developed during that time. I can remember it was blossoming throughout the city with how the churches were responding to the needs of people. Not that it still doesn't, but those programs were developed. Tomorrow is the day in which we honor Martin Luther King Jr. And it's also the inauguration of Donald Trump to be our president. Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping into the future. Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping into the future. Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping into the future. The lyrics of the song continues. I want to fly like an eagle to the sea. Fly like an eagle, let the Spirit carry me. I want to fly like an eagle until I'm free. Feed the baby who did not have enough to eat. Shoe the children with no shoes on their feet. House the people living in the street. Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping into the future. I've shared the opening of my ministry here at Grace, and it reminds me that each period of time raises challenges for us as a society, as individuals, as Christians, as people who are asked by God, to love our neighbor, whoever they are, and to love ourselves. Our worship together opens that door weekly. Our lives in the future will be challenged in ways we do not yet perceive. Each time period has its own moments in which we move through one challenging moment to the other. We're in one of those challenging moments now, with many issues, but I would hold up one: climate change. Climate change is real. It's not a hoax. A challenge we are accepting more and more. Sad to say, it's slow. Our daughter and her family live in Midtown Los Angeles. They are safe at this time, but they've had friends evacuate and have lived with them. Some of their good friends have lost everything. They've been in homes that are no longer there. They've lost everything. Our very humanity is being tested by the vast destruction taking place in Los Angeles. And if you're like me, these moments in time and challenges, like I've referred to in the past, they slip away in our memories. New challenges come to us and we respond and we keep going. Or do we respond? Is a question mark. In 1 Corinthians today, the Apostle Paul highlights the gifts each of us have been given. Now, there are varieties of gifts, but the same Spirit there are varieties of services, but the same Lord. There are varieties of activities, but it is the same God who activates all of them and everyone. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. Paul goes on to list some of the services, the variety of services offered, gifts. I would ask you a question. Questions. How many here of you chosen to be born into this world? Raise your hands. How many of you chose to be born where you were born? Raise your hands. You didn't choose, did you? The truth of the matter is that we are all children of God, living out our humanity, moment by moment. Jesus came to us in a moment in time to fulfill our humanity with his own life and death and resurrection. He came to fulfill our humanity and point us to a future that includes all of us no matter who we are. And the gifts we've been given are awakened by the Spirit of the living God in Jesus Christ to be able to love one another as God intended. It is up to us to discern and offer our unique gifts to each other that only we as individuals can offer to each other. We are a people of hope. What lies before us is God's future, always has, always will be. My own experience in Christianity has allowed me to know the wonderful gifts of people that I've known: scientists, politicians, nurses, teachers, scout leaders, ordinary everyday people, people of color, rabbis, priests, handicapped people, and on and on and on, with many people and many gifts. I've had 40 years of involvement with Palestinian Christians. My heart aches now with what's going on in the Middle East. We've got a hospital in Gaza that is out of commission, pretty much, run by the Episcopal Church. 2,000 years of our history trying to bring reconciliation and healing into the picture of Palestine, Israel. The wonderful human beings I've known there have shined lights out of darkness. Thousands of people throughout my life have touched me in my ministry, and I've touched them with their gifts. These people are often unknown to me. We read about them and we read them. People of the past, people that we read our newspapers, our books, currently, things that are coming to us now. Known and unknown. I did not know the person last week offering to help me out of my car. A gesture of kindness. You can be that person in various kinds of ways, by who you meet and who you talk with, kinds and ways of circumstances that only you, with your unique and wonderful gifts, can accomplish. As the future slips into the future, and as time keeps on coming, good times as well as dark, the Spirit of the living Christ is discovered and rediscovered in each of our lives if we let it. Pray for our country and pray for yourselves. Respond with your own gifts to be an answer to your own prayers.